Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night. Hey there, believers. I got another great episode for you this week. Today, I'm bringing on Richard, or Rich. Before I get into that, let me explain. I know that the YouTube videos have been kind of hit and miss for whatever reason. My batteries keep dying on my on the camera that I'm using. And yeah, it's plugged straight in, so I shouldn't need batteries, but for whatever reason, um, it still wants to run off batteries, and now the batteries are dying. So I got both of them on the charger. Um, they're supposed to charge while it's all plugged. I don't know. You know how it is. The camera just switched off on a conversation I was having the other day and has yet to come back on. So a few of these episodes are probably just going to be black screen. You might see some captions scrolling by. You might see a static image. I don't know. However, I'll work it out. But just know I will have video up when I can. Now, back to the show. Today, I'm bringing on Rich. He is a retired police officer. I'm not going to say where he's from. He can get into those details if he so chooses. But he has an amazing account that I cannot wait to dig into. It's something that happened to him while driving down the highway. He entered some sort of dome, some sort of portal, some other realm. I don't know exactly how it happened or what happened, but I believe this man's testimony, his story about it. He will explain it in great detail. He went through. He gave a great email explanation, but I know that speaking to him, we can really flesh this out. And if you've experienced anything like this, please let us know, because this is just, it stumped me. We've all went into areas, or if you like to hunt and stuff like that, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like if you're sitting there and then all of a sudden it feels like you're not supposed to be there, or it feels like you're being watched. Okay, imagine that feeling, but then take that feeling into an experience like he's going to explain, and see how you would react. Okay. If you have an experience you'd like to share, come on the show, just holler at me. It's the bump podcast at gmail.com. You can also send a shout out or text to the bump phone at 304-812-0553. If there's anything fun or funky you want to send to the show, I put it on the shelves or whatever. Or if you have a book you want me to review or read, or just whatever. I love reading. I've done some book reviews, some editing in a way for some people before. So just whatever, just holler at me. The address to send that kind of stuff to will be P.O. Box 1453 at Chapmanville, West Virginia. Zip code is 25508. All right. If you'd like to support the show, please share it. Tell your friends about it. Put it all over social media. Beyond that, if you would like to send a contribution to the show, it is buymeacoffee.com/thebumppodcast. Any and all donation contribution is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for considering it. All right. I think that's everything covered. By the time this airs, we will probably be looking at late August. Right now we're in late July. Okay, so if anything crazy has happened in the world between now and then, and I don't have it on here, I apologize. other than having the occasional episode with Pete, I don't really get into a whole lot of current events. I like to just stick to experiences. So that's what the show is for. And sometimes it is a little bit of a reprieve from this, I don't know what else to call it, but crazy, this weird world that we're living in right now. Um, there's a lot that's going on that affects all of us. Um, and it don't matter where you live. It don't matter where in the world you live. There's things going on. There is a battle between good and evil going on. There is a spiritual war in heaven that we reflect here on earth. So just keep that in mind. And I think that's how all of this connects. All of it. All right. I'll shut up and let's just try to understand what's going on with Rich and this experience he had.
My name is Richie. I was a police officer in the North Slope Borough Police Department in northern Alaska for 20 years, and I'm retired from there. I've got about 28 years on altogether as a cop here, there, and everywhere. And so the North Slope Borough is kind of hard to describe because it's basically the Alaska equivalent of a county. And Alaska doesn't have counties, it has boroughs, but this borough is basically the size of Oregon. So if it was a state, it would be the 10th largest state. And it goes across the north slope of Alaska, which is the entire northern coast. So Eskimos, polar bears, yes, Eskimos, a perfectly fine word to use. They use it themselves. It's not a bad word to use. But the whole Arctic coast with polar bears and tundra. And they've got a lot of strange things. It's very, very wild country up there. And when my wife and I, when we first moved up there, we'd heard about things like the Iminarok, for instance. And the Iminarok were the little people of the tundra. And when we first heard it, we're like, oh, that's, a cute little native legend. And by the time I'd lived up there 20 years, we fully believed that stuff.
Really?
The things they talk about up there.
Oh,
So,
I'm
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, I'm already interrupting. I just got done saying I won't interrupt you. But the
Yeah.
Imanaric, is it like okay?
So the Iminarok are the little people of the tundra. And so the story was that the Iminarok are these little people. They're about knee high and they can run really super fast and they're mischievous. And they used to live among the Eskimos. And then in the village of Tigiak, which is Point Hope in English, which is the oldest continuously inhabited location in North America. There were people living there when Jesus walked the earth,
Wow.
but they used to live among each other, and a human dog killed an Iminark baby, and it caused a rift. So the Iminark left the humans and went to live underground, and that's where they live to this day. And again, when I first moved up there, I thought, oh, that's a cute little legend. But I've talked to just too many people I know and trust that see them all the time. There were some kids who used to play at our house all the time when we lived in Koktovik. Now, Koktovik is a little village in the Arctic Ocean, about 60 miles from Canada, so way far northeast. And these kids, I knew them. They were honest. They never told a lie, but they were walking down the beach there, and there's this wrecked ship there on the beach in Koktovik. And they saw this little man sitting there on the side of this ship with his little legs dangling like this, dressed in traditional seal skins, caribou skins. And they got scared and they ran to the nearest house, which is only a few feet away, told the adults, and they went hurrying out there and saw these little footprints going out in the mud and the snow out in the tundra. And they tracked it for a while and it disappeared. And I've just talked to a lot of people that they'll have their boat on the shore and an Iminarok will pop up and just start running along the shore at the same speed as a motorboat going.
Wow.
And so I believe these things exist. What they are, I have no idea. My guess is that these things are probably something demonic. I personally have a view that back in the day, the Watchers, the B'nai Elohim in Genesis chapter 6, came down. They did some nasty things with women and created the Nephilim.
Yes.
And if you look in one of the apocryphal books, Jasher, it talks about they did some mixing of different animals and things they shouldn't have done and made some really weird crossbreeds. I kind of suspect maybe the Iminark are a result of something like that, some sort of creepy DNA crossbreeding.
Yeah.
But it's similar to like the Cherokee Little People, the same thing. They're supposed to live off in the forest. They're the mischievous ones. The Hawaiians have the Minihana,
Hmm.
which are the warriors. You're supposed to, if you hear their drums on the trail in Hawaii, you're supposed to get off the road or they'll kill you. They're just found all over the North America. I just think it's all the same thing.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that there was of course, there would be. I mean, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it's in all cultures, but I had
Mm-hmm.
never heard any accounts or anything. That's interesting, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish I'd taken more time to talk to the elders about it. They kind of were hesitant to talk to white people about it, not because they're ashamed of it, but because they're used to white people just kind of smirking and just being dismissive. And it's like, to them, it's real. They've seen them, they've interacted with some, and they get tired of white people kind of rolling their eyes. So they are a little reluctant to talk about it.
Yep.
But another one of the posts I was in is Anaktuvik Pass, and that's where it's the only inland uh the only place of all my posts that was away from the ocean. It's in the Brooks Range, and the Nunami live there, and they're the inland Eskimos. And this is right up in the Brooks Range, a beautiful place. You can't drive in; you can only fly in. And Anaktuvik has two rivers that come into it. And one of the rivers we'd fly up in all the time with the pilots, and I would be usually sitting next to the pilot because it's a teeny little plane, and they would call out that they're coming into Giant Creek. Well, I get to talking to the pardon me, I'm looking down because I'm trying to find a name of this. Uh, the Inusogrok is the creek, but they would call it in the tower as Giant Creek on approach. And Inuksogrok is the Eskimo word for that creek. And when I got to talking to some of the locals, that word means giant person. And they said that they'll go camping and hunting everywhere around there, but right there, they won't go there because whenever they go up Giant Creek there, Inuksogrok Creek, in the middle of the night, something will attack their camp and throw boulders at them, not rocks, boulders that a human couldn't throw. And I had thousands of bear encounters. Bears can't throw boulders,
Right.
and something will grunt at them, smell terrible, and throw boulders at their camp. And so they have to run away in the middle of the night back to the village, and they come back the next day and their camp is destroyed. And so they just sort of write it up. The giant people live there, and they don't go there. So they kind of accept it as part of their area. So they not only have the little people, they have giants that live up there. But I've never talked to anyone who's seen one. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's a Bigfoot thing or if they're actual people. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a lot of these Sasquatch encounters, don't it? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
man, what an
Because some of the
interesting place to
Sasquatch,
live.
I mean, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in
Oh
Washington
yeah,
State,
dude.
and up there, it's almost fact that Sasquatch exists. Everyone, because that's the number one place in the country for Sasquatch sightings and UFO sightings, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that those two are related?
I think maybe.
Okay.
If I had to, I've never seen Sasquatch. I do believe he exists, but I think that it might be another DNA thing that they got mixing, or maybe it's just an undiscovered primate. But
Yeah.
there seems to be a lot of correlation between Sasquatch and UFOs. And it seems to me that if I was whatever the UFO, which also think is demonic, I think it's just a
Yeah.
demonic thing pretending to be technology gods,
Yeah.
that those Sasquatch would be useful, in the sense that you've got something that's bipedal, kind of smart, can get some work done for them.
Yeah.
But maybe just be kind of a guide on the ground in some fashion, or maybe they're just big dumb animals. I don't know.
Makes sense either way, don't it?
It doesn't seem like they're dumb, but it seems like sometimes there's a lot of UFO sightings around them. And I've heard of situations in which Sasquatch acts just shy and such. And
Hmm.
other times he acts aggressive. And obviously, when I say he, I mean them.
Right.
But when there's aggressive, it often has red eyes. And that seems to be a difference. Like there's something else behind there other than just an animal that's
Yeah,
just being
man.
shy.
Yeah. And if you take into account, if and I don't see why you wouldn't take into account like what they call the woo woo
Hmm.
stuff, the
Yeah.
disappearing tracks and
Hmm.
the all the tele telepathy and everything else that goes along with it.
Yeah.
I tend to lean more toward uh genetic manipulation
Yeah,
sort
like
too.
something the Nephilim were fixing around and messing
100%.
around with.
Yep, 100%.
And it also, if you accept that premise, it kind of makes you wonder about a lot of animals that we accept. as just being natural animals that maybe they were not originally something that God created. Look at the platypus. This thing is like a practical joke God played on Darwin,
Right.
because it's supposed to be, it's classified as a mammal because they've got nothing better to call it. But so it's got warm blood and fur. Okay, so you got yourself a mammal, a lactates mammal, except it's got a beak. Mammals don't have beaks. It has a duck bill and it lays eggs.
Right.
Okay, so you got yourself a bird, except it's venomous. So you got yourself a reptile, except it's warm blooded. It's like God has a big drawer filled with spare parts on day of the creation, and he decided he didn't want to lose them.
Yeah.
So he just cobbled them together into this thing. Or maybe the Nephilim were picking and choosing and trying to come up with something, and that this is what they came up with, and they just turned to loose.
Yeah, I just thank God that the platypus is pretty small. I
Yeah.
mean, if he had the attitude of a like a badger and the size of a black bear, we'd be hurting, man.
Yeah. Well, the meanest animals in Alaska are the birds. They're the geese and stuff, and that's why. And the moose are not small, but they're God didn't give them teeth and claws for a reason. He gave them the
Yeah,
attitude, but not the ability. And the bears have the ability, but not the attitude.
that's a good point.
But also Anaktuvik Pass. So, like I said, the place I worked was huge. The size of Oregon, and you can only drive into one location there, and that was Prudhoe Bay, and that's where the oil comes from. So that's where the pipeline comes from. And so 1/5 of all the gas you've ever put in your car came through that pipeline through there. And when I was stationed there, which I love being stationed there, there's anywhere from 12 to 14, 12 to 20,000 oil workers there. They mostly mind their own business because they're at work. But I could drive, you can actually drive to that location on the Hall Road, which is the Dalton Highway. And so there's this one day I was driving. It's a beautiful spring day, not a cloud in the sky, bright and sunny. It's maybe 10, 12 degrees out, which for spring in Alaska is a pretty nice day. And I'm going up the highway into Adigan Pass, which is about 60 miles east of Anaktuvik Pass. And I look up ahead, it's this big wide valley you can see forever. I'm kind of painting a picture because it's flat tundra and you can just see forever. And I see up ahead, we've all seen like a shimmering in the road
Yeah.
that looks like, when there's heat. And I saw that, only it was extremely distinct, and it was in the shape of a giant dome, like a giant soap bubble miles across, just sitting there. And it was really distinct. I could see the top, the bottom, the sides. And I'm pulling up closer and closer, and I'm having some trepidation because this thing, I don't know what I'm about to drive into. I slow down a bit, but then I go through this thing, and I had a very accurate thermometer on that car. And suddenly all the windows start icing up. It gets really cold, and I look in the thermometer, it dropped down to 50 below zero almost instantly.
What?
So I'm struggling keeping the heat up, trying to see out the windows. But it was also this weird feeling of just like evil that was there. It's like if you've ever walked into the break room and people are gossiping and they kind of stop gossiping because you walked in and they're kind of waiting for you to leave. That's what it felt like. I didn't see anybody in there. I didn't see anything, but it was just this weird feeling of just oppressive evil. And the temperature verifiably dropped 60 degrees all at once. So I drive across maybe 2, 3 miles, and then the shimmering's coming up ahead as I'm getting to the far side of it. I go out and go out of it. Nothing really happens other than the feeling of evil goes away. And suddenly I have to turn the heat down because all the ice is falling off the car. It suddenly jumped up to 10, 12 above zero again, jumped up 60 degrees instantly. I was up in Alaska for 20 years. I've never seen anything like that. And even that temperature, I've only seen it in the 50s below zero a few times. 56 below is the coldest I've seen before wind chill. And but it had been months since it had been that cold. And so there couldn't have been a pocket of it laying around. It's just it had been somewhere above zero for weeks, months. So I've never quite figured out what that was. That's actually why I reached out to you. I didn't know if you'd heard anything of that nature.
Yeah. No, no, I haven't. Um, and to actually see a distinct, did you feel anything driving into it? Did
It
you?
just felt evil. It just felt, I mean, I've been in places, certain lodges and places around people that clearly have some, like Wiccans and things, and you just feel an evil hanging out there. That's what it
Right.
felt like. It just
Man.
felt like I'd walk into a meeting of something that really didn't like me, didn't want me there, and was waiting for me to leave.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever felt that when you're around just a certain places where just evil things have happened or people do evil things, it just feels evil.
Yeah, man. I do understand what you're talking about to an extent.
Hmm.
Like I've been hiking before and walk into an area where it feels like I'm not supposed to be in this spot.
Yeah.
Or even just be hanging out in the woods. Cause I used to work out in a state park and
Mhm.
I would go back into the woods and, make some ramen noodles or something, just something to get away on my lunch break. And there would be certain places where it felt like I was being watched,
Yeah.
or all of a sudden it felt like I was being watched after I had been there for a while and it's time for me to leave. But I haven't felt that absolute hate, like that
Hmm.
evil. I felt endangered a little bit, a little bit
Hmm.
like, okay, don't make eye contact. Like if you walk down the wrong street
Yeah.
in New Orleans, you don't want to look in people's eyes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I feel
Uh,
it in New Orleans. I've only
yeah,
been there once. The absolute best food I've ever tasted. I
yeah,
couldn't
man,
believe food could taste that good. But you go across that bridge and it's like you stepped into something big and evil lives there.
man,
Neat city, beautiful city. I love it there, but there's just something about that feels off.
yeah, man. That's as close as I can get to relating to that.
Yeah.
Um, when you entered through this dome, did you did the vehicle respond in any way? Like, did it have any kind of glitch? Did you
No,
feel it pushing through the bubble or?
I felt nothing physically. The vehicle didn't do anything other than the window started icing up so bad I couldn't see. And at that point, I was more concerned with not being able to see, and I was getting very, very cold. The heat couldn't keep up. I'm actually a pretty cold-blooded person. I like it nice and cold. I usually keep the car around 40 degrees, and I'm comfortable. But even then, I was cranking the heat and still shivering. And I'm just trying to get the ice off the windows so I could see out the windshield. And it's a bright, sunny day. That doesn't happen when it's bright and sunny.
Yeah.
But as soon as I went out and on the other side, the ice was coming off in little chunks. I mean, it was melting quickly, and I had to turn the heat down because I was overheating because
Wow.
it was just an instant little change.
That's so wild. Is there any meteorologist that that might be able to explain some kind of weather phenomenon that would sit like this in an area?
Not that I've heard or I can think of. And I wanted to ask someone about it, but the Brooks Range there, I got to thinking, well, okay, maybe there's a cold pocket that got up in the mountains there, but these mountains aren't high, and there could be a cold pocket of air trapped in one, but we hadn't been that cold for months,
Right.
and so it would have had to been sitting there for months and months, and the sun is exposed to it every single day. It's spring, so we do have summer, day and night during the spring. In the winter, it's dark all the time. In the summer, it's light all the time, but we had day and night there, and whatever was trapped there, it was exposed to the sun every day. It shouldn't have been that cold.
Man.
So I
I'm just
wanted to ask a meteorologist about that, but I just don't know what would cause it. It didn't
right.
seem to be, it wasn't a downdraft because I could literally see the top of it. It was dome shaped. It was like a giant soap bubble, is what it looked like.
Yeah. And I'm asking these questions even though I didn't believe that there would be any kind of weather anomaly that would account
Hmm.
for that.
Oh
But
no, that's the first place we have to go. Is there a
yeah, man.
reasonable explanation? Yeah.
Um, wow. And plus I wouldn't take out the human element of that, the feeling of evil, the
Yeah.
oppressive feeling that you had while you were in there.
If
Um,
something's off, you might have a feeling of evil just because this isn't right, and you might feel creeped by it.
right.
That's it. That's critical thinking. You got to go down those paths.
Yeah. Yeah.
But something was there. I could feel something big and wrong there, something evil,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Do you think it was some kind of portal or where have you landed on this?
I don't know. It seems to me, you look in the Bible when Jacob goes to sleep one night when he's fleeing, he has a dream and he realizes this is the Jacob's ladder, the stairway to heaven. This is where angels are coming in and out. So angels who are even they work for God clearly have physical limitations in the sense they need to travel. You can see this also in Daniel when one of the most remarkable scriptures in the Bible is when Daniel is praying and the angel shows up in swift light and says, as soon as an answer was given, I started here, but the prince of Greece resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, your angel, came, helped me fight the guy, so I got away. So here I am. I'm going to give the message, and I'm going to go back into the fray. And that's a remarkable thing that this archangel, the strongest guy, 3 weeks got delayed by the
Right.
forces of evil, which meant he was traveling physically. Took him a while to get there. Now, I don't think he was a second late because if God wanted him there 3 weeks earlier, he would have been.
Right.
But it shows that even angels that work for God can't poof poof here and there unless God does it. They kind of need to travel to their appointments, and how much more would the forces of evil also need to do that? They don't have better abilities than good angels do, than holy angels do. And so at the same time, they would need to do their own sort of portals in places like that. Jacob's ladder, this appears to be where heaven and earth, where that area, angels were coming up and down. So maybe this was an evil portal of some kind. I have heard stuff like that, like, the different ranches, the what is the one, Skinwalker Ranch,
Yeah.
things like that, where a lot of monsters and UFOs, things like that, are all kind of centered around a certain spot, and they seem to appear and disappear there. So perhaps the forces of evil have to have their own doorways and portals, and that has been suggested to me that perhaps, because a lot of times there's coldness associated with that, that maybe that's what that was. Maybe some things were coming and going at that time, and I don't think it's coincidentally either. This is only 60 miles of Maniqutupic Pass. And in the lower 48, 60 miles, you could have 5 towns in that town. But up there, that's next door. I mean,
Yeah.
Alaska, I used to travel 1,000 miles to work one way and not leave the state. So 60 miles is right there. And I don't think it's coincidental that that's right next to where the giant creek is as well.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, these are all good points that you're bringing up, especially like with the temperature drop. We associate that immediately with the paranormal, right?
Mm-hmm.
How often does that happen that say, the temperature drops 20 or 30 degrees in a room? So
Yeah.
that if you would experience this, you know, on a highway, just 2 and 3 miles wide, though, that is
Mm-hmm.
something enormous. Let me ask this: was there any account that you recall of um, something bad happening, or some kind of crazy sightings or phenomenon going on in the same area at the same time? Or
No, I hadn't heard anything, and I kicked myself for not taking the opportunity to ask the elders about it while I had a chance. Say,
yeah,
this is what happened. What do you think that was? Because the elders have forgotten more about that land than any scientist will ever know. In fact, the scientists go up there in droves to study the tundra, and the experienced ones know when they have a question, go find an elder, because the elders know. They may not be able to read, but they can tell you everything about the land.
yeah,
And so I imagine one of the Eskimo elders probably might have had some insight into it, but I don't know. Before white contact, shamanism was the thing up there. And the Eskimos very quickly, when they learned about Jesus, they call him Atonic because he's the so the white people showed up and said God made everything, and they said, okay, well, who made God then? Which is a good question.
right.
And the missionary said no one made God, God always was. And so they named God Atonic, which is the God that came from nothing. And that's when they abandoned the shamanisms. But the shamans, I mean, they would actually, if you cross them, they would kill you. They, like, in the spirit realm, they go into a trance and they would actually kill people. One of the Charlie Brower is a gentleman. He was a whaler in the mid 1800s. Wrote a fantastic book called 50 Years Below Zero about his adventures up there. And he met one of the last shaman up there called a Tunguruk, who it was in Point Hope, Tigigak, the one I was talking about earlier. And he said that a Tunguruk took him out to a graveyard, and the graveyard's there because they can't really put him in the ground because it's frozen. So they put bodies above the ground on a frame and let them kind of rot in the. And there were about 70 people, bodies there, and a Tunguruk bragged he'd killed all of these people. And a lot of the ways the shamans would kill people is they would go into a trance, into a sweat, and they'd contact the spirit realm, and then the spirit would go in the middle of the night and just kill them in their sleep somehow.
What?
And one of the first believers up there was a gentleman by the name of Menelik, who was supposed to be a shaman, but he accepted Jesus, and that's kind of its own story right there, an exciting story, because God came to him before white people came along, a century before, and he got to know God in Jesus. And so the shaman said, "No, you're going against us, so we're going to kill you." And all of his friends are like, "Dude, they're going to kill you." And he's like, "I'm not worried about it. The God I know and his son will protect me." So he and his wife just curl up and go to bed. And so the shamans start doing their thing. And all night long, the shamans kept going at their thing. And in the morning, a Tungruk wakes up, night or not a Tungruk, but Niluk wakes up just refreshed. And they said, we came over to kill you in the spirit realm and you were covered in light. And we couldn't get anywhere near you. We tried all night long. The spirits could not get near you because you're protected by this light. And they were afraid of him and left him alone after that. But one of the things Menelik said, this was a century before they knew white people existed, is that pale people would be coming across the waters in umiaks, which are boats powered by wind and fire. And they're going to bring disease, but they're also going to bring word of Jesus, of God and his son. And that's precisely what happened. And when they showed, and the first missionaries showed up, they're like, oh yeah, we were expecting you. They kind of knew this was coming. So that's a little
Wow.
side tangent about Manilik, and an interesting little story there. But when the Eskimos learned about Jesus, that's the end of that. They walked away from shamanism, and the Eskimos, they read in the Bible about miracles, and they just accept it wholesale.
Yeah.
They don't understand why white people don't pray for miracles. Uh, this is another little side tangent, but it's a great story. The last village I was in was Wainwright, and in the summer there was a guy working there on the airport with some machinery, and he had his finger torn off with the machinery, and so he starts running away, missing his finger, bleeding, screaming, and the other guys are pick up his finger and they're trying to catch the guy. And he finally gets control of himself. He ran down the runway a little bit, and there was a patch of flowers. And he said, for some reason, he thought the Holy Spirit was in this flowers. He shoves his hand down in the flowers, and his finger instantly was restored. And they ran up to him with his finger. We got to get you to the clinic. He's like, no, you can throw it away. I don't need it anymore. Because they just believe God said miracles, God said healing. So miracles and healing, because they accept it wholesale.
See, I love that. That's faith, man.
Oh,
That
yeah.
wow.
My wife and I actually wanted to write a book, Once Upon a Time, Miracles of the Eskimos, because we would hear all of these stories of just people raised from the dead, and the Eskimos sing, they praise, they thank God, but they're not surprised.
Right.
If you and me were at a funeral in the South and suddenly, somebody laid hands on the casket and they sat up, that would everyone would be astounded. But
Yeah.
the Eskimos, maybe not so much. I'm not saying everyone gets raised from the dead, but they see it happen and they thank God because, well, of course, God raises from the dead. He's God.
Yeah. Man, I wish you would write that book. I would buy
I
it.
wish I would have. I'm not up there anymore. Is the problem. I've retired. Well, I
Yeah.
retired as cops retire, which is I've retired twice since then. I went to work for a police department in Spokane, Washington, before I came to the South. Now I'm in the South where it's hot and muggy and the people are wonderful and I love it here. And I'm still working here. I'm only 51. I'm just a kid. I'm too young to retire for reals.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, if you retire now, man, you'd have to find a very active hobby. You know?
Yeah. Cops work until they die, or
Yeah.
they work until they stop working. They usually die within 18 months. That's the statistic. When a
Wow.
cop retires the last time, within 18 months, he's dead because we don't want to retire. We just want to keep working until the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, don't stop, man. No.
But there was something else that reminded me talking about the feeling of evil. So this is gonna be hard to believe, but in college, I walked away from the Lord a little bit. I know that's never happened before, but yeah. And I kind of got into some stuff, and God protected me from getting into too much stuff because there's probably some stuff I would have got into, like sleeping around and drugs, that God just didn't let me. I would have done anything because I was kind of mad at God for a while. But I was hanging out with some people I probably shouldn't have been hanging out with, and my friend, we were over at somebody's apartment, and they were smoking stuff. I did not. I've never smoked anything in my life other than a good cigar.
Right.
Never taken drugs, never smoked pot. I was stone sober. But my friend Rick decided he was going to go into the bathroom and do the Bloody Mary trick. And have you
Uh-huh.
heard of this? This stupid, it's not stupid, but it's a real thing where you look yourself in the mirror unblinking and call for Bloody Mary, and she's supposed to show up. I say it's stupid, but it's not stupid because she doesn't show up. But if you call a demon, I think it's like a Ouija board. It's not a game.
That's it.
But anyway, he says he's going to do this. And even though I was kind of falling away, I'm like, Rick, you really don't want to do this. Just don't do this. But he did it anyway. I was the only one there that was even nominally a believer. He comes in, goes in the bathroom, does it, comes out, and he goes, nothing happened. But he said, I felt something really weird and evil all of a sudden. So I'm like, I told you not to do it. But then suddenly I started craving pizza, frozen pizza from a grocery store. And then everyone else there is like, yeah, we should get pizza. Yeah, from this grocery store. And they all were craving weirdly pizza, frozen pizza from this one obscure grocery store. And that was the weird part, is all of us were friends because we all worked at a Godfather's Pizza. We could have gone there and got all the good pizza we wanted for free instead of
Right.
crap frozen pizza. So I was the sober one. So I'm driving, And I have to paint a picture here. So Spokane streets are really super wide. This is Spokane, Washington. I don't know if I mentioned that. They're super wide, and they're like 2, 3 times larger than any other streets. And the yards are big because they just had a lot of space to spread out back in the day. We're going down an arterial street, very well lit. And I see this guy I can only describe as stalking away from us, just angry, furious, giant steps, walking the same direction as us on the sidewalk. It's like 2 in the morning, and he's wearing a long black cape with a hood over it, and he just looks so pissed off.
Hmm.
And everyone in the car is like, whoa, what the crap, because there's something just radiating off this guy that feels wrong. And I'm slowing down, and as soon as we get up to him, this is kind of hard to describe, but when you call out your friend at a party and he turns around and looks and kind of scans and then sees you, and then
Yeah.
when he turns around again, he just looks right at you. Well, this
Right.
dude turned and looked at us, and he just looked right at us like he'd been watching us through the back of his head. And half of his face, there was a line right down the middle, was black and half was white. And I don't mean African American and Caucasian, I mean pure black and pure white. And he looked at us with hatred I've never felt before, hatred and loathing and anger. He looks at us, and then as soon as right when we get up next to him, he turns 90 degrees and starts going down the middle of one of these big residential streets. These are big and wide. And it was so freaked out. Everyone in the car is freaking out. And I stop, go back, lose sight of him for maybe 3 seconds, and we look for him, and he's gone. And he was going down the middle of the street. And if he had taken off sprinting from where he was, he couldn't have reached anywhere. The guy vanished. He vanished. And that
Wow.
was the same feeling of evil. But I think Rick called the demon, and the demon showed up and wasn't very happy about being there. And that's about the same time I stopped hanging out with these guys. But it was a little later on, it was like a year or two later before I really started getting my life right with the Lord. But during this time, I was still single at the time, and I would have like sleep paralysis, and I'd be laying there trying to take a nap, and I'd be paralyzed and terrified, and I could like hear things chattering in the apartment, like talking in a language I can't understand. And as soon as I'd fight through it, it would all instantly stop. Well, during this time, I never told anyone this but my wife. I don't even told my wife this one, but I'd be asleep at night and I'd wake up this happened maybe 5 or 6 times, and my sheets would be shredded like Wolverine claws. And there was
Oh,
three of them
wow.
back and forth, and we didn't cross each other, the just like Wolverine. And it was always 3 claws, and it was always one thing. It's sometimes my bottom sheet, sometimes my top sheet. One time it was my pillowcase. And I couldn't figure out how this kept happening because it wouldn't harm the mattress or me. I'm literally laying on this thing and somehow it's happening. And even, I mean, if I was going to do that sleepwalking, I would have to it was a tiny apartment. Like you had to if the bed was folded down, you couldn't get from one side to the other without climbing
Right.
over. They folded it in the wall and took up half the floor space. And so I would literally have had to take all the sheets off the bed, lay it out, get a razor blade and slice them, even if I was doing it in my sleep and sideways. It just couldn't be done. I had nothing in my apartment to do it. I was a bachelor. I owned like a coffee cup
Yeah.
and a plate to make nachos on. And that happened like 5 or 6 times. Sometimes it was the top sheet, sometimes it was the bottom sheet, and the one time it was the pillow. And I had to throw them away afterwards because they were unusable. But I think that just during that time, there were forces of evil that kind of wanted a piece of me, but God was holding them back until I got my life straight.
Man, thank the Lord. What a
If you
terrifying
call a
thing to
demon,
happen
go
to.
get a demon. It's not going to be what they want. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, I was saying that's a terrifying thing to wake up to, man.
Yeah. And nothing would happen in the middle of the night. Like I just wake up just like a normal night. Well, it's college. I'd be hungover. That was
Right.
pretty common for me. But and it's like, what the criminy happened? Especially when it's my sheet on the mattress. I'm fine. The mattress is fine, but somehow between us, this sheet got shredded like Wolverine claws, top to bottom, multiple slashes, back and forth, back and forth. I don't know if I've ever told that story to anyone. I don't know if I ever told my wife that one.
Man alive. That is wild. Yeah, that what else could that be other than the hand of God just keeping you safe through the night, man?
Yeah, and demons were wanting a piece of me, and God, just like Job, saying, "Well, he's being an idiot, so you can do this only. Don't put a hand on his flesh." And so they couldn't.
Yeah.
During the same time, this is about when I was kind of getting to police work too. I had my first police job, and 3 different times that week, I almost died. Like I got hit by a car while I was running, and I wasn't hurt bad, but it ran into me. A second, what was it? I think there was, yeah, it was the first time I ever got shot at, and it missed me and stuff. And the third time, what was it? I had a lot of adventures. It was three. I got in another car accident. That was it. All this happened in the space of 3 days, and then my friend Mary, who I'd been very close with in high school, but I kind of just not talked to her for a few months, calls me out of the blue, and she said, "I dreamed we were at Bible camp, and that they found your body dead." And I told my mom about this, and she said, that I have to call you and make sure you're all right. She didn't know anything had happened to me, but she'd been praying for me. And I'm like, oh, well, it's funny. The world's been trying to kill me all week. Hit
Yeah,
me with a car, hit me with another car, shot at me. And I came out of it unscathed, even by being hit while I was on my run. I was fine. But it's like, I think God, the devil was trying to kill me that week. And God's like, no, you're not. You can
man.
scare him a little bit, but that's it.
God had big plans for you, man, and he's using you still yet to this day. I mean,
Yeah.
blessed are the peacemakers, right?
Yeah. Well, he just had some plans for me. That's the only reason I'm alive today. I mean, I was a cop by myself in the bush in Alaska for 20 years, and I can honestly say I wasn't afraid because I go in without backup. But it's like, well, I might get beat up. I've been beat up before. It's not the end of the world. It never happened. Last time I lost a fight was in 1984. But if I get killed, then I'm going home, and whatever happens, none of it's random. I don't have to fear any of it because God ordained it. So okay, if he decides I'm going home today, well, that's all right with me.
That's it.
Sounds good. If he wants me to live through another day, well, that's all right with me too. I'm having fun. Got a wife, pretty wife, and kids, and
You can't go wrong, man. To die
yeah.
is gain, right? To live is Christ, to die is gain. Man, let me ask you, just this is just gee whiz stuff from my notes. Um, spelling. I am not good with Alaskan words. So, what pass was this on? That this big
Anaktuvuk, Anaktuvuk, and it means literally place of caribou poop. There's a funnier way of saying that, but we'll just leave it polite.
I
Caribou
bet.
poop. Because when they were used to be nomadic, the Nunamute, and then they would follow the caribou herds around, and then they decided in the 70s they were finally going to settle down, and so they found this place, lots of caribou poop around. They're like, well, caribou apparently like it here. Let's do it here, and that's when they formed their village. Cleared some rocks out of the creek bed so the first plane could land there, and next thing you know, they've got internet and everything.
Sweet, sweet. I live in West Virginia, and we got some weird names for stuff too, man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
well, there's a whole area we call it Big Ugly. So
I
everybody that
heard of
lives
it.
there are residents. So it's like there was an actual newspaper article about a woman that passed away, and it says "Big Ugly Woman Dies." It's like, so I get it.
Yeah, that's a good headline.
Yeah,
We just moved to Kentucky not real long ago, so I know some people in the South don't consider Kentucky the South, but the rest of the world considers Kentucky the South.
absolutely, absolutely. I was just in Kentucky. Let's see, what is today? Monday, Saturday. So 2 days
Oh,
ago.
really?
Yeah, we drove almost to Lexington, Kentucky from West Virginia. We drove.
I'm just north of Lexington. Yep.
Are you really?
Yeah, about 45 minutes north of Lexington,
We
halfway
were.
between Cincinnati and Lexington.
Yep. We were in a place called. It's spelled like Irvine. Well, we didn't know if it was Irvine or Irvin
I've
because
heard of it, and I don't know either. I've
yeah.
only read it.
Um, but we just happened to be going down there because my buddy had bought some parts for his Jeep, some new
Mm-hmm.
wheels off this guy off of like Facebook Marketplace or whatever. But we just happened to be in the same area. That's wild. That
Yeah,
recently we were within an hour of each other. Um, Another
yeah.
word, Manilik, that name.
Manila, Maniluq,
Oh, of course.
Maniluq, Manila.
All right.
A Tungaruk's a real. That one's a doozy.
Which one?
A Tungaruk, if you want, that was the last shaman. That one's kind of a doozy.
Yes, let me get that one.
Okay, let me see if I can remember. A Tungaruk. Ahtuangaruak.
Woo. That's the last shaman. And I got one more.
The river.
What?
Okay, I'm
No,
gonna look that one up because I've got it in here and I want to make sure I get it right.
Well, the last one I'll take the river too, because in case I put it in the show notes. Um, but the little people that
Oh, Iminarak. So that's Iminaruq.
oh man, see, I almost had that. I
Yeah.
had ICK, but it's UQ.
Yeah, in Eskimo, the Inupiaq, I learned to speak Inupiaq when I was up there poorly. And the Q's and the K's are really important because if I could say kak tunya means I'm hungry, but if I say kak tunya with hard Q's, that means I'm stoned. And if I say kak tunya with one of the other, I said I'm a grayling whitefish. So yeah, the pronunciations are kind of important.
I guess. Oh man.
That
Uh,
reminds me. So Kaktunya, the grayling whitefish. That's where Koktovik, the village I originally told you about, that's where it gets its name. And there's another story out there that just reminded me of when I
yeah.
was out there. There's this old World War II hangar, so the runway there is just dirt out on the out in the rocks on the this strand of tundra, and there's no rusty World War II hangar out there. And I went out there one night. It's all dark just to see if there's polar bears, and I saw an orange orb hovering over the Arctic Ocean, and the Arctic Ocean is of course frozen and there's nothing out there. There's no shipping. There's no, if you draw a line straight out, it's 2,000 to 3,000 miles straight to Siberia. And there's this orange glow orb just hanging over the ice. And I'm looking at this I'm behind the hangar going, what is that? I'm like, well, I bet if I get a better view of it from a couple miles down at the runway. So I pull around, start driving towards the end of the runway and it disappeared. I didn't see it anymore. And I'm like, well, I'll just go out the end of the runway, see if there's any polar bears. Don't see the light, don't see the light, don't see any bears. Go back to the hangar and I'm looking, I still don't see it. And I'm like, you know what? Just for giggles, I'm gonna go behind the hangar. There it is again, hanging out, probably 2, 3 miles out over the ice. And I found I can only see it when I was standing in one spot. If I went 50 feet any direction, it would disappear. But this orange orb just hovering out over the ice. And Alaska is one of the top places for UFO sightings. I saw them up there multiple times. In Washington State, when I lived there, that's the number one place for UFO sightings. So last summer, I was still living in Spokane, Washington, because after I retired, I went there for a couple of years. And my second job was, organ delivery. Basically, organ donors, when they pass, you need an emergency vehicle to get the tissue to the recipient.
Right.
And it's a job I loved. And I was driving through central Washington, so Moses Lake. It's flat as a pancake. It's all desert. Everybody thinks Washington is evergreens. That's Seattle, but most of Washington's all flat desert. A beautiful sunny day about noon, not a cloud in the sky, and off the I-90, off a little ways up over a field, I see this what looked to me like is it the B1 bomber is the flying wing?
Oh yeah.
I always get mixed up with that and the F-117. But this looked like a flying wing,
Yeah.
and
It's a
it
big
looked
one.
like it was stretched out. It was like a half mile long, silvery white with a little cockpit in the middle, off at an angle, weird kind of little bit of an angle. And I'm looking at this, I'm getting closer, and it's coming towards me. And I'm like, well, in a second, I'm going to be right next to it. So I look at it, and I look at the road, look back, and it was gone. It had disappeared. This thing was huge, like a half mile across.
Wow.
And I checked later on the UFO reporting line just for giggles to see if somebody else had seen it. And there was a guy that was in an Alaska Airlines flight. I don't know this guy, have no connection to him at all, but he said he was at that very moment in the flight looking down on the Moses Lake, and he saw a giant silvery white disc just hovering over this field. And he said it was huge. And then he was watching it, and then saw it zip off. So he and I apparently saw the same thing. I saw it on end. That's why it looked like a long
Yeah.
thin thing to me, like a flying wing coming straight at me. But back to what we were talking about, DNA creations, I think that all these aliens, I don't believe they're from another planet. I don't believe that. I think this is the devil's next deception. I think that this is just, they're pretending to be the gods. 500 years ago, gods were volcanoes and storms, things we didn't understand. And these evil things, the demons, pretended, fallen angels, all that stuff, pretended to be these things to get worship. And I think now we understand all that stuff, so they're having to up their game. And I think that's what aliens are. I think they're the Nephilim host, demons, fallen angels, all this stuff that are pretending to be this thing. and they're pretending to be aliens because they're going to want to be worshipped as gods here pretty quick. I think you and I, by the sounds of things, Jesus is going to be coming back here pretty quick, and you and I are going to be leaving.
Yeah.
And that's going to leave the devil with some explaining to do when millions of Christians disappear, like we've been saying for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And what better way to explain that deception than aliens to suddenly show up, show themselves openly, say, no, no, that was us. Don't worry. Your little Christian grandma is fine. We took her away somewhere. She's safe. We're re educating her. But now it's adult time. We are your gods. We put you here. We created you. What better way to kind of, get the feces back in the horse?
Yeah. Wow.
Just
Yeah.
my own thought.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. 100%. Every word of that I agree with, man. It's all part of the
Yeah.
deception.
And
Um,
Christians will debate what is a demon a fallen angel, or is a demon fallen angel children, as in the Nephilim died and they became demons, like it says in the book of Enoch. I lean towards that, but I don't think it matters one whit, because it's like, this is kind of a crass way of putting it, but it doesn't matter. Is this the dog poop or the sandwich the dog poop touched? It doesn't matter. Wash your hands after you throw it away. It
yeah,
doesn't matter. It's all bad. I don't care what the origin story is. We have authority in the name of Jesus. If you don't know Jesus, then you are a defenseless babe among a pack of wolves. But if you know Jesus, well, the title for your life is signed over. They've got nothing on you.
that's it. You're redeemed. You're blood bought, buddy.
And if
I
you don't know
agree.
Jesus, it's a simple thing. It's not hard. People think you have to earn it. But the Bible says if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart God's raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. That's it. You don't have to climb a mountain. You don't have to flog yourself. You don't even have to work yourself up to a froth. Jesus said, you invite me in, I will come in, and that's it. Free of charge. You can't earn it. And that's all you got to do to earn it, is just say, I can't earn it. I'd like some of that, please, Jesus. Come on in.
Amen. That's that's one of my favorite Bible verses. That's Romans 10:9. I have that in a decal down the side of my Jeep. Just just Romans 10:9, just waiting for people to ask. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
That's
man,
the
I
South. You
love
can do that there. Maybe not so much in Seattle. They'll throw rocks at you there.
it. Hey, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah, here we are I think still the majority,
Hmm.
there's people that say they don't talk about religion, and then there's Christians, and then you get a handful of people that disagree. But
Hmm.
that's why I love small towns, man.
Yeah, in Kentucky here, I mean, there's definitely people who don't walk as Christians, but even they seem to respect Christians if they don't
Exactly.
accept it outright.
Yeah.
There's at least a respect here.
Yeah.
In Washington State, not so much. It's open hostility, open
Wow.
hostility. It's
That's
unfortunately gone very south. I was thankfully from Eastern Washington, which is way more like Idaho, but it's not Seattle. Not all
right.
Washington is Seattle, just like not all Oregon is Portland. But ours was the same side of the state. But even then, there's a lot of hostility towards it, and it's
Yeah.
just it's the coming darkness. It's happening now. But
Wow.
God's not losing ground. That's the thing. This is not
Yeah.
a struggle between God and the devil. The God does not struggle against the devil. The devil
that's,
struggles against God.
that's a
No
fact.
more than a 3-year-old attacking Joe Rogan. It is not even a fight. And God's not losing ground. The devil just thinks he's gaining it, but that's not true.
That's it. Amen. I agree 100%. Man, I like the way you talk, Richie. I like
Like
it. Uh,
a Canadian redneck who knows the Lord.
who knew? That's my people.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, is there anything else you wanted to get out before we wrap this up?
No, sir. I think we did it. I mean, I can keep boring you with stories, but those are the big ones there.
Man, that is beautiful. That's perfect. And yeah, man, if there's ever anything else you want to talk about, just holler at me, shoot me an email,
Sure.
and hopefully it won't be so difficult to arrange a time. But
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. I'd be happy to. You've got my email, and if you're ever in my neck of the woods, say howdy.
will do, brother. Will
You know
do. I
where I work.
appreciate
I can get you in.
it. All right. I will.
All
Thank
right.
you
Yes,
so
sir.
much. Have a good day.
You too.
All right. God bless.